Okay, so if you've seen the other videos on my channel, you'll know that I'm a big fan of animation. And the way that Love, Death and Robots did their anthology series was quite interesting to me. It was able to show off the creativity of the studios behind it and to show off the talent behind the artists working on it. I recently, well, not too recently, about a couple months ago, came across a series called Secret Level. Now, Secret Level was made by the same studio that did Love, Death and Robots. However, this was done by Amazon. They saw how well Love, Death and Robots did, so commissioned the same studio to make their own series. Secret Level's main gimmick is that each episode is based on a video game of some sort. There is one exception to this, which I will get into when I start ranking each episode, but for the most part, they're based on video games. Now, when I rank these episodes, which there's 15 of, I'll keep in mind that if the episode is too confusing to understand without playing the game first, that is a detriment. Because you're appealing to a larger audience than just people who've played the games, especially if you're going to try and make money off of it. I think pretty much every episode did it well that you don't have to play the game to play the episode, but there are a few where it would help knowing more about the game or source material. Without much further ado, let's get into the rankings. There's 15 episodes, and we will be starting with number 15 on my list. So, right at the bottom of the list is Playtime Fulfillment. Now, with the other episodes, I'll say the name of the game and then the name of the episode. But this one, the name of the game, I say that in quotation marks, is Playtime, and the episode's name is Fulfillment. This is the only episode that's an exception to the video game rule. So, to sum it up, a woman is a delivery cyclist that has to make deadlines. She wears glasses and has this orb, like a robot that follows her, that tells her what to do, and she can earn points for doing sort of stuff. So the world is very like a video game. It's a very meta episode, and I feel like it actually plays against it. This episode at its whole is just a promo for PlayStation, and you'll see it as it goes further in the episode. She meets a mysterious stranger who gives her a package that has this weird creature in it. The creature makes, I assumed that it was the creature doing it, makes video game characters appear. She's hunted by Helldivers and then a Colossus and even Kratos, which, again, like I said, the meta aspects works against it because it makes it feel very disjointed. It is not a very good episode. She eventually gets away and then meets the guy who gave her the item, and they just decide to continue going through it because it's all a game. And there's other video game characters that show up, but it's all PlayStation properties. Like I said, it's just one big ad for PlayStation and it doesn't fit. Doesn't help that the voice acting in this episode is probably the worst of the series as a whole. Everyone's voice acting felt disjointed except ironically for Kevin Hart, which you wouldn't think. But yeah, that's number 15.
I've got news for you. You're mine now. You belong to me.
On to number 14, we have New World, and the episode's called The Once and Future King. Now, this is the third episode of the series. I don't know much about New World as a game, so I'm just going to go from my knowledge of the episode. In the episode, this king is sailing to a mysterious island to try and conquer it, but on the way there, their ships are all destroyed, and the only survivor is the king and his advisor. They can't leave the island, and they soon realize that they actually can't die on the island either. So this king challenges the island's ruler, who's his own king, for the throne, and he keeps losing every single time. Eventually, his advisor abandons his advisor and tries to take down the king by any means necessary. He still fails, and he gives up. The main king hands him a crown, and the idiot king just runs away, all happy with it, but is depressed about being alone. He eventually decides to learn blacksmithing from a woman he met on the beach when he first arrived on the island, and reconciles with his advisor. Now, the king is actually voiced by Arnold Schwarzenegger, and you'll notice there's The budget's very high for the show. I think it took a few years to develop too, so it does help. The episode's not bad. The animation's still pretty good, and it can be watched without prior knowledge. The episode feels very disjointed. It's kind of messy, so it's just a nothing episode. You can watch it. It's more of a comedy, so it's not terrible for that, but it's nowhere near as bad as Playtime.
It's not the best choice. It's Spacer's choice.
On to number 13 of my list, we have an episode based on The Outer Worlds called The Company We Keep. So I actually am familiar with The Outer Worlds because I played through that game actually a couple of times regretfully because it's boring as fuck. And the episode feels exactly the same way. So it's about this orphan that works on a pretty shitty planet and he sorts garbage. He meets a guy who's putting up posters and finds out that it's to be test subjects for this major corporation. He takes the job because he actually knows a doctor that's working on the project because they met in the past. She was also an orphan. He eventually gets the job as a test subject and loses all of his limbs throughout it, but sort of played off for laughs. He eventually meets the woman that he missed, and they sort of get a bit closer, but it's not very serious. And she eventually steals evidence for him, and that's it. It's not that great. She becomes the head of the company, and he eventually looks up to the skies, kind of happy but also sad. The problem with Outer Worlds is that it's a criticism on capitalism, but it's not done well. It's done to the point where it's cartoonish, when even the game itself is full of plot holes. You don't need prior knowledge. The Outer Worlds episode, it's just boring, and that's its biggest issue. Now we are on to number 12. This is Concord, Tale of the Implaceable. This is the 13th episode of the season, and this has quite a bit of a story to it, because when Secret Level came out, Sony was trying to push Concord as their newest big thing. They put so much money into this game, which was mediocre at best, and it completely bombed. It stayed up for 2 weeks, and then the servers got shut down, and it was like a $200 million loss. It was terrible. So this episode was probably commissioned because they wanted to play into the bigger world that they were building, but then the game flopped, so the episode on its own just doesn't work as well. To sum it up, this captain of a ship is captured, and her team breaks her out. It feels sort of like a heist movie. But they break her out and they escape. Then they have to try and escape from the guild, which is people who control all the maps in the solar system, which is stupid. Just as a simple plot hole, how would they control everyone having maps? Because you could make your own? It doesn't make sense. But either way, they eventually get away by hyper spacing away, and they send the map to all the other pirates. It's nothing special. It does feel like a pilot episode, and it feels like they were building up to something a lot larger. But of course, that we're never going to see that, and it's no big loss. You have a lot of tropey characters, so it feels like they're trying to rip off Star Wars, and it doesn't make you any more interested in the game, which I doubt it would have helped anyway. Oh, and as a small tangent, if you think blue lipstick looks good on you, and no matter who you are, you're a fucking idiot. And this episode's another example of that. Blue lipstick's ugly. Hey, now we're on to number 11 on the list, and this is a bit of a strange one. This is the 6th episode of the season, and this is Pac-Man Circle. This has nothing to do with Pac-Man at all. In fact, I think this is actually more of a promo for an upcoming game that's related to Pac-Man, but this isn't Pac-Man, come on. So this weird guy, he's not a human, but he looks humanish, wakes up in an underground complex with no memories. he's met by this giant yellow orb, which is supposedly Pac-Man, and is told that he's been chosen to try and escape this alien world. So he picks up a sword and starts practicing. He kills monsters and eats them, and eventually he reaches the exit. And it's got this giant guardian that pretty much kills him, and the giant orb, the Pac-Man, drills into the main guy, and they're able to kill the monster. Right at the end, the main guy realizes that the Pac-Man orb is actually the one trapped on the world, and it needs a body to escape. So he pulls the creature out of him, and he dies, and Pac-Man just goes back to the complex to try and awaken a new one, and try all over again. It's a very interesting concept, I do like it, but it's more of its own story. It has Pac-Man attached to it for pretty much no reason. It feels like an edgy take on Pac-Man, but it's not terrible, so it's definitely worth a watch. You'll see there's not many of these episodes that are bad, but there's none that are, well, I wouldn't say it's none, there's a few that are great. We'll get to those later down the line. Now on to number 9 on our list. This is a an episode based on Spelunky called Tally. My brain first thought Tally was the name of the main character, but no, it refers to tally marks. But yeah, I haven't played much Spelunky. It's not my favorite roguelike, and the episode itself feels like a commentary on roguelikes. You try and try again, and you find fun in the tries, not in winning, which I can understand. I mean, I have played Binding of Isaac, so I know exactly what this sort of thing's like. So this character named Anna, which according to Wikipedia, her surname is Spelunky, which is retarded. But she's an adventurer that is trying to escape this giant creature, and she misses the ledge and falls to her death. She wakes up at the entrance to this cavern, and is met by another adventurer who consoles her. And she just decides to keep running. She keeps dying and resurrecting, and eventually gets tired of it. The older adventurer shows her that even her life has been full of the countless deaths and revivals, which is a line I'm stealing right from Wikipedia. And she's made tally marks all over the cave, which is what the name of the episode refers to. And the young girl decides to run again. It's a very close episode. It's just a fun episode. Nothing too serious. On to number 9, we have Mega Man Start. Now, of course, this is based on Mega Man, which I haven't played much of. I was always quite bad at it. So, in the city, these robots of a doctor that made them have been reprogrammed by his rival. So the rival sends the robots to destroy the city instead of protecting it. And this doctor's trying to make robots that can fight the other robots. One of his creations is called Rock, which is a humanoid creation. He looks like a young child. And he wants to help fight, but the doctor says no, so he sends out a different robot, which eventually gets turned against him like all the others have. In the upcoming fight, Rock's left hand gets severed, but he's able to fight and defeat the giant robot Bomb Man. And he's able to resist the infection from the opposing doctor. Now, the good doctor eventually decides to let Rock fight, gives him armor and that, and he becomes Mega Man. And that's how it ends. Sort of like a prequel to the games, I guess. It's a good episode. The animation style is quite fun, and you don't need any knowledge of the games because, like I said, this feels like an intro. It's a way of getting into the series.
Intelligence is a dump stat anyway. That's why mine is the number that comes after 3.
On to number 8, we have Dungeons & Dragons, The Queen's Cradle. Now, this isn't based on a video game. Well, okay, I guess there is Dungeons & Dragons games. But most people know Dungeons & Dragons for the tabletop RPG. Now, I've played a bit of D&D. Obviously, my campaigns haven't gone the same way this has, so everything's different. And it gives them a lot of room to play with it. This is the pilot episode of the series, and I think it's a okay start to the series. I wouldn't say it's great, but it's not terrible. So this young man is covered in tattoos and he's being prepared to be sacrificed. He hears a voice in his head that torments him. He's eventually saved by a group of adventurers, and they have to try and get the sacrifice marks off of him, because at one point he attacks one of the adventurers without even realizing because of the possession. They take him to a dragon, and the dragon pulls the paint disease out of him and eventually gets infected and dies as this giant monster, which in the episode is called Tiamat. But it erupts from the dragon's body, and then the team works together to try and fight it. The graphics are quite good. The pacing could do with a bit of work, but it can be watched without knowing D&D at all. It can be watched from just an idea of a fantasy series. And I love the visual of the creature emerging from the dragon. It's really good.
Anyway, I started blasting. Bah! Bah!
Now on to number 7 on my list, which is actually the 7th episode of the series. I'm quite good at that. This is Crossfire, Good Conflict. Now, Crossfire is another game that I'm not familiar with, so bear with me if I get anything wrong here, if it relates to the game or not. But it's about these armed soldiers that are both in an abandoned city. One group's protecting a guy with a briefcase handcuffed to him, and the other group's trying to get the briefcase from him. Now, they eventually fight and give chase to each other, but the whole point of the episode is that you don't really know who is the good guy and who's the bad guy. They're both just going against each other. Eventually, they decide to give up the briefcase and continue their job of just dropping the man off at the border, because that's what he hired them for. He didn't hire them to protect his briefcase. They just hired him to protect him. And since the others were off the briefcase, they were able to end their dispute. I think it's quite good. The animation's very good, and the voice acting's very good. For a moment, I thought it was live action, and it's not. So it's good. It's a very concise story, and obviously it's intentional that you're not sure who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. The conclusion's pretty satisfying, and from what I can tell, you don't need any prior knowledge of the game. I have a feeling Crossfire is some sort of squad-based shooter, so it probably fits that very well.
Honor guide me!
On to number 6, we have Honor of Kings, The Way of All Things. Once again, I do not know this game. Feels like an MMO or something, but I could be wrong. So this young man, he is an orphan, and he's challenging a supercomputer that controls his city. So he believes the supercomputer caused his parents' deaths, and the city's maintenance is coming apart. So he wants to take over and defeat the robot. They decide to play this board game, and most of the episode is based around it. It's a very philosophical episode, and I think it actually does it very well. The visuals are very good looking, and you eventually find out that the young man's parents weren't killed by the robot, but they sacrificed themselves to help save the city. The young man's inspired by this and sacrifices himself and the robot, which impacts them both at the center of the city, and the robot eventually gives up. He now is able to leave the palace with the robot's power, and can control the city. And it feels like a bit of a time loop episode, because right at the end it cuts to the first scene of where the young man's approaching the robot. So it's just basically a construct or vision of the future that the robot had been watching. It feels like it could fit quite well into Love, Death and Robots as its own episode without even being related to the game. So from what I can tell, it's a very good episode. It definitely deserves its spot on the list.
You died again?
On to number 5, we have Sifu, It Takes a Life. Now, this is the second episode of the series, and I actually very recently played Sifu for the first time a few days ago. So I can say that this episode fits the game pretty much perfectly. Of course, it's condensed, but it works. So the young man, the main character of the game, is meeting the street vendor before he sees a man enter a club. it's revealed that this man's one of the people that killed his father and killed him. The whole mechanic of Sifu in the game is that you can die multiple times and you age each time you die. You can obviously die a lot more in the game than he's able to in the series. But he enters the club to look for the guy and fight through the enemies in the way. He dies a few times and his age keeps going up and up. By the time he actually meets the guy who killed him and his father, the guy doesn't even recognize him. It cuts to the end where the main guy returns to the street vendor that he had met in the beginning of the episode, but he's now an old man. And the vendor actually eventually recognizes him as the young man, just grown up. I'm not sure how she did that, but because, I mean, what normal person would assume that? It works very well as an episode. The animation matches the game one for one pretty much, and I think it's a really good adaptation, but you can watch it without any prior knowledge. Because when I watched this episode, I was watching with people who hadn't played the game or of any of these, so it fits.
This little maneuver is gonna cost us 51 years!
On to number 4, we have Exodus Odyssey. And you're probably going to get quite tired of me saying this, but I have no idea what game Exodus is. or what it is. I'm not doing research on these because I don't want to spoil anything for myself and get too much knowledge. I'm coming into this as someone who doesn't know. I think it helps better with reviewing the episodes. So in this episode, this guy is a mechanic who's working on an ice world. His daughter is like yearning for more adventure, and she eventually runs away with a guy to explore the galaxy. Now the father is desperate to find her and uses warp gates to get to light speed. Now the episode plays on the concept of time dilation. So for him, he travels, it only takes him like a decade to find his daughter, but for his daughter several decades have passed and she's much older than him now. He steals a ship and is able to meet up with her, who gives him a map to find more artifacts, because that's what they were doing. Their crew stole from an empire called the Celestials, and they were pretty much outlaws for decades. He sees his daughter pass away and eventually decides to return back to the Ice Planet. I think it's something like 80 years after he left. He meets the granddaughter of the woman who helped him leave the planet to look for his daughter. And he decides to go search for more artifacts in memory of his daughter. Again, this is another episode that would fit really well into Love, Death and Robots. The story is very serious and it takes itself seriously. It's a good concept and it works very well. If Exodus is like this, which I actually think might be an MMO, but either way, it works.
I need a robot. I need a robot.
And now we're at the top 3. Number 3 on our list is Unreal Tournament Zan. Unreal Tournament I've played a while back, but I can't remember much about it. It was just like a tournament game. I can't remember if it had story mode. But anyway, this is the 4th episode of the series, and it's about a mining robot that gains sentience. He eventually starts killing his human masters, and he can take control of other robots to do so. All the mining robots are taken into custody and forced to fight as like gladiator combat, and he learns more fighting tactics to keep fighting. He gets the name Zan because I think it's the code that's on his head. His, what should I call it? His system code, or whatever his name is. His product name, you know? And people start liking him. Over time, the person in charge of the games gets their technicians to study the robots, and she sends her like second in command to fight Zan himself. Zan is able to upload himself into the robot that her technicians are studying, and he gains more and more control, eventually taking control of the entire stadium. He defeats the captain, and the game master, the woman in charge, enters the stadium to try and execute him, but he's able to kill the guards and start an overall rebellion. Once again, would make a really good Love, Death and Robots episode. It has all the aspects needed. It's a very good episode, and it can be watched without any prior knowledge. I like the idea of a robot taking over, and they did it really well in this.
Impressive cock.
onto the second best episode of the series, and this is based off of Armored Core. Now, the episode's name is Asset Management, by the way. Armored Core got a bit of a resurgence recently with Armored Core 6, and apparently it's an excellent game. I haven't played it, but it does look good. It's about this core pilot. He's augmented, so he drives these giant robots, which are called cores. And he talks to an AR implant in his brain. He eventually gets alerted about an incoming job and gets in his giant mech suit to fight the other core pilots. The AR notices that the other pilots are also very well synchronized with each other, and he's able to defeat both of them. They continue towards their target and continue fighting more pilots, which are also extremely skilled, just like him. And it's also emphasized that he's a one of a kind. They don't make pilots that are augmented with AI anymore. But as he gets to his target, he finds out that it's a lab like the one where he was made. So the other pilots are actually augmented just like him, which was supposed to have been it's not supposed to be done anymore. And the pilots probably weren't trying to kill them. They were trying to get to him to find out more. And he eventually finds one pilot alive. But instead of it having the ending where he's like, there's other people like me, he kills the other pilot and is very insistent that no one's like him, that he's the only one. And it gives him more of a darker turn as a character. It's very good. I don't know why they made the AR voice so attractive, but hey, that's definitely a creative decision. It's an interesting concept. I feel like having prior knowledge of Armored Core as a whole would probably help, but it's not necessary. And the plot twist of the morality of the main character actually being quite twisted, rather than him being a good guy, is very good. Keanu Reeves does voice the main character, and his face and everything is used for the mocap, but he's not the greatest voice actor. It doesn't really matter, because the story of the episode as a whole overcomes that, and it comes out really well.
No prisoners for the Emperor!
But of course, it can't beat number one, and I have a feeling this is probably a lot of people's number one. And this is also here because of a game that had come out recently, and this is Warhammer 40,000 and They Shall Know No Fear. It's the 5th episode of the season, and it definitely got a resurgence because of Warhammer Space Marine 2. One of the characters is a character from that game. I haven't played either of those games, but I do love Warhammer as a whole. The world is so interesting. So this sergeant is given a mission to destroy a relic with his team. And they're basically told they're not going to survive the journey, but in this universe, that doesn't really matter. His team includes Lieutenant Titus, which is the main character of the games. And they drop to this planet to fight the cultists that are guarding the relic. They eventually reach the relic and are able to destroy it after having to fight the sorcerer. It's played in the beginning of the episode. It's mentioned that this main sergeant once recruited a young man who knew no fear. Normally Space Marines need to be trained to have no fear, but this young man didn't have any fear. As they fight the sorcerer attacks each Space Marine by preying on their deepest fears. And the only one that really resisted is Titus. So it's implied that he was that young man who was born without fear. He wasn't afraid of anything, and he's able to kill the sorcerer. Right at the end, they kill the sorcerer, and they contact the spacecraft to call in an orbital strike to take out the relic. The main sergeant is pretty much ready to die, but the young man, Titus, disagrees, and they get ready to fight a horde of monsters. I don't know when this is set in the Warhammer timeline with Space Marine, but it can be watched on its own. It can be watched with prior knowledge, and that will definitely help if you know more about Warhammer. But either way, it's a very good episode. I have a feeling it might get more people into Warhammer 40k, even though the state of that isn't the greatest at the moment. The voice acting's good, the animation's good. There's pretty much no faults with this episode. definitely the best of the season. And that's it for my ranking. This is going to be quite a bit of a longer video. I mean, it's all 15 episodes in one, and I spoke about them quite a bit more. I want to do more rankings of other series, so if you have any recommendations, please let me know. I'll give them a shot, have a look through them, and let you know what I think. My next video will probably be on a series of horror movies that I've watched. Well, the latest installments come out pretty recently, and I want to talk about it, so we'll see. As always, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment if you agree or disagree with my rankings. Let me know how they are. I'll let you know how you're wrong. And I'll see you in the next video.